Hey guys, it's me, Base Libertarian, and today I want to talk to you as to why inflation is not caused by the corporate profits in the industrial sector, but instead it's caused by the financial sector. So many leftist organizations are saying that the big corporations are behind the rise in inflation, like More Perfect Union here, and inflation is, of course, really bad. It's a big political issue. We can see that it's reduced real wages for at least 2 years, and it is hindering real wage growth even to this day. So where does inflation come from? Well, as we see here, a third of inflation has come from rising house prices. Um, and about 20% has come from the rise in transport costs, which concerns fossil fuels. Um, so, yeah, let's talk about housing. Housing is really important because it's 45% of the consumer price index. Um, because of this, it's insignificant to talk about food and beverages or healthcare when housing is the big cheese in this pie chart. Um, so why is housing so expensive? Well, it's because of a financial practice known as credit creation. This is basically when banks can extend credit not by lending other people's money, but by creating it out of nothing. So as a result, they can lend a lot of money, which in turn creates a lot of money. There is a 2014 article from the Bank of England that says that banks do not simply act as intermediaries, nor do they lend nor do they multiply deposits from the central banks, but they actually create money out of nothing when lending money. And the ultimate limit on how much they can lend is determined by central bank interest rates and quantitative easing. There's a quote here which basically says that broad money is made out of bank deposits, which are essentially debt from commercial banks or currency, which is debt from central banks. And the bank debt, the bank deposits, they make up 97% of broad money. And in the modern economy, those bank deposits are mostly created by the commercial banks themselves. Here's a graph that shows exactly what's going on in the abstract. Here we have a commercial bank with real money, and then suddenly, because of credit creation, they can extend the amount of assets that they have and liabilities by lending out more debt. And this is mostly in the form of lending to financial institutions that want to buy up financial assets to speculate. And consumers, ultimately, they need to take on large mortgages, as we see here, in order to buy these expensive houses. Yeah, and there's also a 2012 study from Richard Werner which shows that banks indeed do create money out of nothing. This has been proven empirically. So as a result, what does this mean? Well, the United States has a ton of debt. $20 trillion is financial sector debt. $17 trillion is mortgage debt. These two types of debt are ultimately caused by the financial sector, which are exploiting credit creation to speculate on all financial assets. So as a result, housing is expensive because of credit creation, which allows for excessive demand in financial assets like commercial rent, land, housing. And this is the ultimate cause of inflation, not just now, but always. But what about food, you ask? What about the Kroger conglomerate? What about all of those big conglomerates? Well, food and beverages is 15% of a consumer price index, not a lot. And according to this graph, which shows where inflation is actually coming from, inflation, 10% of inflation comes from food, so really it's not that much of a big issue. And I know that Walmart has been used frequently by these socialists to talk about corporate greed. Well, let's look at the financials of Walmart. Actually, before we do that, let's talk about this IMF study, which talks about prices. profits, and wages. I'm going to talk about this study because it's been featured in this Fortune article, which blames 1,300 of the biggest corporations that were lying about inflation. And according to this article, the IMF have released a study that says that 45% of inflation is caused by domestic profits. Well, I am the guy who checks. As it says in this study, firms have passed on more than the immediate nominal import cost shock. Given the increasing profit share of gross value added, firms have so far been relatively more shielded from the adverse terms of trade shock than wage earners. But this does not necessarily imply that profitability, which is the markup or profit margin, has increased. So what this is saying is basically, if the price of a product goes up, the profits that comes from selling that product will increase, even if the profit margin is the same. 10% profit of $100 is $10. 10% profit of $120 is $12. So someone could say, 20% increase in corporate profits. Corporate greed, we need socialism. There's also this passage of text here which says that one of the causes behind inflation is also just a disparity between wages and item prices. When there is a supply chain shock, prices will go up overnight, but not wages, because wages are determined by rigidities like wage negotiations. Myself, my salary is determined by annual or biannual wage reviews. And if you read the conclusion here, it says that, as well as the work of other studies recently published, as the work of the other recently published studies show no conclusive verdict on whether profitability has increased or not, given no signs of a sharp, broad-based increase in profitability, we do not find evidence that would warrant substantial concerns or policy interventions in terms of competition policy. And Walmart is one of the big boogeymen of corporate greed. Well, let's look at the financials. According to documents published to the SEC, corporate profits have remained the same. In fact, if you look closely, we see that corporate profits have actually gone down for Walmart. And if you want to look at corporate's net profit margin, we see that it has always been below 3%. And right now it sits at about 2.5%. So this idea that Walmart and all of these other food conglomerates are jacking up prices to shaft the consumer is simply not true. All of these increase in commodity prices have just been passed on to the consumer, and it's nothing to do with corporate price gouging. And yeah, that's just why prices have gone up. Alright guys, this is the end of my video. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.